Throughout Nintendo's illustrious history, they've always managed to stay at the top of the charts when it comes to sales, being responsible for 6 of the top 10 best-selling titles of all time. Even with the immense success that the company's had for over 4 decades, Nintendo has also gone through some major stumbles, releasing some absolutely horrific selling titles. In today's video, I'm going to be looking at both sides of the coin and showcase the best and worst selling games for every Nintendo console. Now, it's important to note that I'm going to determine the sales not by the amount of money made, but the amount of units sold, as calculating for inflation rates and differences in pricing would be near impossible. As well, I did have some trouble finding the exact numbers for older consoles and lesser known games, so on the worst selling side, some of the numbers may be inaccurate, but still relevant enough to be considered on the lower end of that spectrum. Oh yeah, and before I get started, my name is Copycat, and if you haven't yet, then please subscribe to my channel, hit that bell button, and click the join button if you want to support me and allow me to make videos for years to come. To start this video off, we're going to look at their very first home console, the Nintendo Entertainment System, which was released in North America in 1985. This system had a library of over 700 games, but quite honestly, it's no surprise that the original Super Mario Bros. Is the best-selling game on it. Shipping over 40 million copies worldwide, sometimes with Duck Hunt alongside it, this game completely took the world by storm and cemented Nintendo as the go-to video game company. Super Mario Bros. Was also responsible for revitalizing the home gaming industry, and to this day is a franchise that continues to grow in popularity. Now, figuring out which was the worst selling game on the NES was a lot more difficult, as there wasn't one that initially stood out, but after a bit of researching, I came across a game called Little Samson, released by Taito in 1992. Now, not many people knew about this game when it was released, as Nintendo and Titus did absolutely no advertising for it, and on top of that, its production numbers were extremely low. Even with this being the case, it still resulted in very poor sales, meaning that there are not many cartridges of this game out there, also meaning that a copy of this game is now worth upwards of $1,000. For this video, I'm going to split the original Game Boy and the Game Boy Color into 2 different sections, as they are technically their own unique systems. The first was released in North America in 1989, being mainly shipped alongside the ever-popular Tetris, meaning that by default, it's considered the best selling on the system. The next game that was sold separately on this list is Super Mario Land, the series' first handheld title, that sold a pretty high total of 18.1 million units, where the next best selling game, Dr. Mario, only sold 5.3 million units in comparison. When it comes to best selling games on the Game Boy Color, it's no surprise to me that Pokemon Red, Blue, and Green take the top spot with 31.3 million units sold, albeit all in a combined effort. Pokemon Gold and Silver take second place with 23.1 million units, and Pokemon Yellow, a standalone title, was able to sell a pretty high 14.64 million copies. The only non-Pokemon game that appears in the system's top 5 best-selling is Super Mario Bros. Deluxe. That was a port of the NES Classic with extra minigames added, that only managed to sell 5 million units. I had a lot of trouble finding exactly what was the worst selling title on both systems, but after a bit of research examining what games are considered rare and why, I found 2 that fit this category. On the original Game Boy side, I learned about a title called Spuds Adventure that was developed by Atlas Studios in 1991. This Zelda-like adventure game follows a sentient potato trying to rescue the Tomato Princess from the evil clutches of a demonic beetle named Devi. So yeah, it's weird. This was the second installment in that Puzzle Boy series that had an extremely small production and literally no advertising, causing it to sell very poorly, and presently made it become one of the rarest games on the system. Now, the worst selling Game Boy Color title originally came out on the Sony PlayStation in 1999, but a Game Boy version was released in 2001 called No Fear Downhill Mountain Biking, developed by THQ. Why a game that had already received terrible reviews and sold poorly on one system would be transferred to another is beyond me. And not surprisingly, very few people bought this racing game. Also, its release on the Game Boy was slated well after the Game Boy Advance became available, so a lack of interest in old technology was also a huge factor in its terrible performance. Nintendo's next home console was the Super Nintendo Entertainment System that was released in North America in 1991, having a library of over 700 titles. By a long shot, Super Mario World is the system's best-selling title, where it shipped out 20.6 million copies. The next closest selling game is the Super Mario All-Stars Collection at 10.5 million copies, followed by Donkey Kong Country that was able to sell 9.3 million. Now, the game I want to mention in the worst selling category didn't necessarily sell the least amount of units, but deserves to be here as it's one of the most underperforming games of all time in Earthbound. Developed by Ape Inc. and HAL Laboratories in 1994, it was only able to sell 140,000 copies in North America, which Nintendo considered a colossal failure at that time, especially as they spent millions advertising for it. What also didn't help this title was its content, as this RPG was seen as too raunchy for kids with many dirty jokes and suggestive material, causing parents to stay away. Of course, Earthbound years later would become a cult classic, with fans demanding a series reboot to this day. The company's next home console was the revolutionary 3D polygon touting N64, that was released in North America in 1996. Now, in comparison to the other consoles we've already talked about, the N64 actually sold pretty poorly, only being able to ship out 32.9 million units, where the NES sold almost double at 61 million. Even though it was in high demand when it was initially released, lack of games and high production costs kept sales from ever reaching their potential, and the console was actually outsold by the PlayStation in Japan a year later in 1997. Now, personally, I don't think it's any surprise that the best-selling game for the N64 is Super Mario 64. That was only one of two launch titles at the time, although it only ended up selling 11.9 million units, which in comparison to the releases we've already mentioned, is on the low end of things. It's actually a bit of a head-scratcher to me on why this console didn't fare better, as it contained fun, simple games with easy controls, plus multiplayer experiences allowing people to play with their family and friends. Either way, a game I'm going to showcase as the worst selling is also one of the most controversial of all time in Conker's Bad Fur Day, that ended up performing well under expectations with only 55,000 units being sold. Even though it received high praise from critics, many attributed its failures to its M rating, and because of that, Nintendo refused to talk about it in any of its game websites or Nintendo Power magazine. All that, coupled with its late release well into the system's lifespan, resulted in a very small niche market of only older gamers who were still interested in the N64. Nintendo's next foray into the handheld market was with the Game Boy Advance, which was released in North America in 2001. Following a similar trend to the Game Boy Color, the top 3 best-selling games for the system are all Pokemon titles, starting with Ruby and Sapphire at 16.2 million copies, then Leaf Green and Fire Red at 12 million copies, with Emerald coming in third place with 7 million. By this point in the company's history, the Pokemon series had become the quintessential handheld experience, as it was an expansive game that didn't need incredible graphics to be a lot of fun. The worst selling game on the Game Boy Advance was another attempted port, but this time from a title called Worms Blast, that completely underperformed initially when it was released, which led to the GBA version's production to get absolutely nuked. This poor performance was almost definitely based on it not being an actual mainline Worms title, and instead is a puzzle game, which in all honesty, doesn't need to exist in a world that's already saturated by the genre. Developer Team 17 clearly wanted to try and make money off an IP that was consistently growing, but this idea backfired. The next home console Nintendo would produce is the Gamecube, that was released in North America in 2001. The first real disc-based system from Nintendo, the Gamecube sported vastly updated graphics, processing power, and memory storage from its predecessors, allowing it for much larger, fantastical titles. One of these, and the best selling on the system, is Super Smash Bros. Melee, the follow-up to the N64 fighting title that was able to sell 7.4 million copies. When I first read this number, it actually surprised me, as I thought it performed way better, But it turns out that the GameCube was not a particularly great selling console, only garnering 21.7 million units in sale, which probably has the PS2 to blame, as it blew it out of the water, selling an astronomical 155 million units, becoming the best selling of all time. The only game I came across that fit into the worst selling category is one called Gotcha Force, that was developed by Capcom and released in 2003. This adventure/fighting game, based on the Japanese gachapon toys, just didn't translate well into the Western markets, as at the time, it wasn't a well-known phenomenon outside of Asia. On top of that, there was zero advertising by either company, meaning that kids would have to see it on the store shelves and want to buy it there, which clearly just didn't happen. Nintendo's next handheld console was the DS, which stands for Dual Screen or Developer System, depending on who you ask, which was released in 2004, selling an outstanding 154.2 million units, really returning the company to their dominating form. The best selling on the system was New Super Mario Bros. DS, the re-envisioning of 2D Mario platforming that managed to get out 30.8 million units. The worst selling game on the DS is a very infamous title called Elf Bowling, which was originally developed by Endstorm in 1999 for the PC, but was ported to the DS illegally by a company named Ignition Entertainment in 2005. Now, it's unclear to me how this was able to happen without any repercussions, but fans quickly caught onto this misdeed, especially as the DS version cost $20, where the PC game is completely free. Not only did this game fail to sell, but it also received terrible reviews across the board, where to this day, many regard it as the worst DS title ever. The company's next system was the Nintendo Wii, which was released in 2006 and would become their highest grossing home console, selling just over 100 million units. Now, on paper, the system's best selling game is technically Wii Sports with 82.9 million units going out, but it was included with the system when you bought it, so the actual highest grossing game is Mario Kart Wii, that was able to ship out 37.3 million units. Now, on the worst selling side of things, there's one title I want to talk about that Nintendo and Sega thought would perform way better than it did, called Mad World. This beat-em-up, hack-and-slash, motion control title was released by Platinum Games and Sega in 2009. Mad World was met with rave reviews from almost every major critic, but was unfortunately only able to sell 123,000 copies, which was well below what was expected. This probably had something to do with the game having an M for mature rating, which historically, as we've seen, has been a tough sell on Nintendo consoles, usually because parents go with the company to ensure their kids stick to family-friendly content. The game failed to do anything at all in Japan, only selling 3,000 units during its opening week, debuting at a low number 33 on the sales charts. Even with the terrible results from Mad World, Sega and Platinum Games wouldn't give up on mature games, which was an amazing decision as they would go on to eventually release Bayonetta that would sell over 1 million units. One of my favorite handheld consoles Nintendo's ever produced is the 3DS, that possesses a revolutionary 3D screen that works without the use of any glasses. The system proved to be relatively popular, and since its release in 2011, has sold just over 75 million units. The best-selling game for the system isn't a Pokemon title for once, as Mario Kart 7 takes that top spot, being able to dish out 18.9 million copies, 2 million more than the combination of Pokemon X and Y. The one game I was able to find that I want to mention in the worst-selling portion of this video is a Mario game that completely underperformed. This is a remake of Mario & Luigi, Bowser's Inside Story, and Bowser Jr.'s Journey, that sold so poorly at 20,547 copies that its developer Alpha Dream filed for bankruptcy shortly after its release. This was such a bad performance that it actually took the title of the worst-selling Mario game of all time. If the Wii was one of Nintendo's most successful home consoles, then the Wii U sits on the opposite end of the spectrum, only selling an extremely low total of 13.5 million units. Not a single title reached over 10 million copies in sales, with the most being Mario Kart 8, being able to get out 8.45 million units. The only game I want to mention from the worst selling side is Sonic Boom: Rise of Lyric, that was developed by Big Red Button and Sega in 2014. With only 620,000 units sold worldwide, Sonic Boom was seen as a failure, mainly due to the limited reach of the Wii U and Nintendo's own missteps, but also because the game scored extremely low with critics, which definitely didn't help. Now, if the Wii U was Nintendo's most recent mistake, the Switch was their saving grace, where the system's development is still active since its release in 2017, selling over 80 million units presently. Just like the Wii U, Mario Kart 8, but now in its deluxe form, is the best-selling game on the system with slightly updated graphics and all DLC packs included in this version. Although it is a bit early in the system's history to know which exactly is the worst-selling game, I can definitely say the worst game on the system is Vroom in the Night Sky, which was actually a launch title for the Switch, but by its gameplay, you can see how bad it actually is. Devoid of really any story, the objective is to ride on a magic motorcycle through a series of hoops to what end objective, I'm not even really sure. You can tell that the company Poisoft, who developed the game, was just trying to make a quick buck to be one of the first games on the Nintendo Switch eShop. Alright, that's gonna be it for today's video, guys. I really hope you did enjoy this one. If you like these type of videos, please let me know in the comments below. Also, please leave a like, subscribe, and I do now have a join button on my channel where if you become a member, you'll get early access to videos and custom channel emotes. Also, please go follow my Instagram at Copycat Gamer, where I upload some cool clips and items from my collection that you won't see anywhere else. Hope you guys all have a good day, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye!